Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. I'm so happy to welcome today my dear friend, my Choctaw sister, Kristin Gentry. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here and spend time with you.
It's great to see you as always. And I know you have a lot going on. I want to explore the adventures you've been on, but also you have a new position. You are the Director of Community Engagement and Outreach for Native Realities. I'm excited to hear about your work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a new position. I've been there for a little over a month now, and I've already been traveling the country doing some work for it.
Tell us about Native Realities.
Okay, so Native Realities and ATCG Media, they're both companies owned by Dr. Lee Francis at Laguna Pueblo. And then, so one side of it is a Native publishing company. So all like doing an entire process of finding writers, Native illustrators to match those tribes, and then actually publishing the content, all of it. Or when people come and they want their book published and they may need help finding an illustrator that will be culturally sensitive and understands their own tribal culture. That's just such a unique thing to be able to have both sides, have the artists, have the illustrators, the writers, and then the entity that's actually publishing the book be Native as well. That's just so unheard of.
Right.
Yeah. So that side of it. And then we do events around the country, community events. We do a lot of focus on pop culture, comic books, all kinds of indigenous futurisms. Think of like STEM-based projects, all of that. And we try to hit different communities that are really working to involve their communities. And so sometimes they need a little help doing that. Sometimes they've never done it before. They have seen our success. We'll be in our 7th year next year for what started as Indigenous Comic-Con. And then it gradually morphed because it became so much more than just like comics, so much more in pop culture. So then we have film and movies and musicians, video games, all kinds of things, like anything you can think of, like for pop culture, there's typically Indigenous people doing it, and we want to exemplify that. So that just kind of has swept the nation. And that event started in Albuquerque. It's been in Colorado. It's been all the way in Australia. And then this past session, it came to Oklahoma City, and it'll actually return to Oklahoma City one more time next year.
Well, I wanted to start out with your role with Native Realities and that aspect of community engagement and the outreach, because it's so perfect for who you are as, as a person, culturally, but also professionally. You're an artist, you're a writer. You have worked with diverse cultures, diverse tribal cultures, and you're a real relationship person to the Native community. And I've really have appreciated and enjoyed knowing you personally, but working with you professionally as well with your work with First Americans Museum. So I can't think of, I'm really excited about the work you're doing, and you're a great fit for that.
Thank you. I've always felt like I love people so much, and I love creating things. I've always felt I can kind of like mold myself into any job I've ever had. So my position at First Americans Museum was like great as well. I got to do a lot of that same thing, community building and doing events there. When this job became available, it was almost just like reading my own resume. Like what they were looking for was like, that's like my whole life. So figuring out ways for people that maybe have never been involved in their culture, helping bring them in. I'm very against gatekeeping. There's so many different reasons why we come to where we are without knowing our culture. Indian removal, boarding schools, language disparities, poverty, just everything, complete annihilation of our cultures. That put a lot of people that are like living today without having been able to be raised in their culture. And so they're looking for that. And a lot of times that comes, maybe by college age, 20s, 30s, 40s, people are wanting to reconnect and they don't know where to start. So that's where Native Realities is so great, because we're taking those pop culture things that everybody already does. And then they realize, oh, there's Native illustrators on the cover of Marvel. Things like Reservation Dogs. Sterling Harjo as Sterling's just changed the whole world for everyone.
I love
now.
it.
Yeah. So with all of that there, that's kind of the whole idea of Native Realities, to be able to not just stay in one place and be stagnant. We're ever changing, ever evolving. We are contemporary people, and we want to show the world that. So that's kind of what we get to do with Native Realities. And me personally, since I get to kind of direct that, I get to go into so many different tribal communities. I get to bring them all together. I get to take all those different tribal communities across the country, different countries, Canada, because there's Indigenous people everywhere. And always have that education element. I started as a teacher. I went to school to become an art teacher. And I still get to teach in that manner, whether I'm teaching through art, whether I'm teaching through these events. And non-Native people are often just kind of surprised. They didn't realize maybe somebody was a Native actor per se, or maybe a musician. So it's nice to see people learning those things and embracing it, and then supporting it, and it's a nice way where people are, maybe non-Native people are kind of they'll stand on the outsides, or they may never go to a powwow. Right. It's a little confusing for them, but they understand a Comic-Con or they understand, let's go to a movie premiere. Right. And these people live right here in Oklahoma with us. So they, it just kind of breaks down a lot of those barriers, and then everybody gets to learn a little bit more about our culture.
Right. Food, film, festival, museums, artwork, that engagement, those become those safe spaces, the middle ground where we welcome people. And I'm really, I just really appreciate that, because you're right, there are so many Native people that aren't connected to culture. And so these experiences may be that first window through which they learn about who their people are.
Yeah, and you just never know what's going to be that moment for someone. And I get to do really fun events. They're not just boring conventions, right, or you're sitting in these long lectures. It's hands-on activity. It's revitalizing ways we've always done things. This past IPX, which is our Indigenous Comic-Con, which is now Indigenous PopX, we got to do glow-in-the-dark, glow stickball. I love playing stickball. Cool. Yeah, it was so fun. And there was all these really cool challenges on all aspects, even to just make the poles that you would score with, the goalposts in a stickball game. If you think of lacrosse and having 2 points at either end. So how do you make that light up? So there was all this type of engineering, getting power to it, and lighting an entire field with black lights, and keeping it safe still. Right. Because stickball can be pretty dangerous in the daytime. We kind of limited it to 18 and over for that one. Typically stickball would involve all ages, anybody. So we kind of limited a little bit just for safety, and we had IHS nurses come over. We had a whole nursing station. So luckily nobody got injured or anything, and it was so much fun. We had glow sticks, and it was just a really fun way to reintroduce people to maybe stickball, or introduce to them for the very first time. And then they now everyone wanted to learn how to play. They wanted to bring their kids back at First Americans Museum, because they have camps for kids to learn how to play. Yeah, with their coach, Ace Greenwood, and
that's so great.
Yeah, so it was really cool. He had to figure out some other things too, and we had to bring in people to help us figure out how to make the poles light up. And then how do we make our sticks light up? And the ball was probably one of the hardest things to keep glowing. So those kind of little things that you would never really think about. It's just kind of these fun ideas. Wouldn't it be cool if we did that?
Yeah.
And then I get to do that. That is Native Realities. When you think of that, it's what realities? Virtual realities, augmented realities, coming out of such a hard time for so much loss with COVID and the pandemic. This year's IPX was just such a great, a reunion, bringing all those people that have been spending all this time together And we're such creative people. We create things, we make clothing. So the cosplay aspect was really great. We got to use that as a huge teaching opportunity to how you don't appropriate our culture. But here's some great ways that you can find characters, Indigenous characters, without doing those like inappropriate things. And it was just amazing because of all of our like sewing skills. People's costumes were just like unbelievable to me.
I know. I love also seeing the incorporation of beadwork and other, really bringing together traditional ideas and traditional forms and the expression in very progressive and contemporary and unsuspecting ways. And you're really creating magic. Magic is when people are learning something and having fun. Mm-hmm. And that's just really cool.
It is. And I think like FAM, First Americans Museum, is still like the best place for it in Oklahoma, just because of all of the space it has, the facility, and the mission of FAM itself. We didn't talk about it, but I worked at FAM before I worked for Native Reality, so that was really cool. I knew the facility really well, and it was a lot easier, I guess, for someone to plan an event there that had already worked in the facility, and just to have that support there and. Just see what FAM could even do, right. Like how much we could, like we literally used every single room, the full museum, like to the full extent. So all the architects that worked on it should be happy. Everything was used.
That is so great. And I know they have really great camps. I know your daughter Jewel has participated in the camps. And what will Native Realities be offering this summer for kids?
Okay. So we have a program called Comics for Kids. Dr. Francis started that, and he is always working for us to get comics in like the hands of kids all across the country. We get a lot of great sponsorship with Americans for Indian Opportunity, which is LaDonna Harris. She's from here in Oklahoma, even though they're stationed out in Albuquerque. For IPX, their company donated as many school kids that wanted to come throughout the state. If their schools would bring them in, then AIO would pay for those kids. We had a whole education day just for that. So for this summer, I've got to do some smaller outreach. The Jacobson House in Norman, Oklahoma reopened. They invited my company out. And so I got to do the tabling there, and I got to sell Roy Boney's book. And so Roy's from here in Oklahoma. He's from Tahlequah. He's a Cherokee artist. And he's one of the artists he's one of those Marvel cover artists. Like he's out there making the comic books, making those covers. And he just launched and like his first book ever. He's such a prolific artist in that he just makes so much art every single day. And not everybody can always have access to that. So Dr. Francis and Roy work together so that everybody has a chance to own one of Roy's pieces. And Roy's one of my own friends, and I knew him years before he created this book. So it's really special when I get to celebrate a writer and an artist that's also my friend that is here in Oklahoma that supports our state, that, just brings attention here to Oklahoma, like what we're doing. And so that was one of the things we did at the Jacobson House. And then I was able to like give away things for kids, give them comic books. We always have so many sponsors that want to do the same thing, like Scholastic has sponsored us. And so we just have great young adult books, comics for all ages, graphic novels. And my daughter even read her very first graphic novel because of my new job. It was about D&D. And then one of the characters was Navajo. And so we worked, my boss, Dr. Francis, worked as like the cultural consultant to make sure that character was culturally correct.
Yeah, that's important.
It is. Yeah. So I kind of saw from working at First Americans Museum how hard it is to source books, not only written by a Native author, but a Native illustrator. And then that third thing, that it's culturally correct. That's a hard trifecta to find. So I'm kind of excited that I get to help bring more of that. And that'll just go into the school systems. We'll be able to create a new curriculum. It'll help teachers. It'll make it easier for teachers because it'll be done for them. And we don't have to worry about if they're teaching something incorrectly. And then hopefully the kids like it too. Yeah.
That's a sense of that Native artistic sovereignty, of creating that from, Native creativity and artists and sources. And it's really cool. We've known for some time that there's a renaissance, a cultural renaissance happening in Oklahoma, of course, with the opening of museums and cultural centers and First Americans Museum and all of the activity and artwork that's happening around our state and festivals and gatherings. It's also, for thousands of years, there have been networks, on this continent where, Native peoples have been exchanging and learning and sharing and producing art and really learning from one another. And that's still happening today across Indian countries. So that renaissance is rich. It is flowing. It's fluid. And it's really cool to see. I know that you have been networking in that world with other organizations and artists and educators and others. I know you were just I know you've been out to the Northwest, to the Southeast. And can you talk a little bit about some of those connections where Oklahoma is central to this? There's so much happening where these networks of cultural and artistic exchange are happening all around the country.
Yeah. So I literally just got back very late Monday night, early Tuesday morning from Tacoma, Washington. I'd never even been to Washington at all. And so I went right into a community space. So Lisa Frashanti at Alma Tacoma, it's like a native... It's not just an art center, and it's smaller than FAM. It's not like a museum. I'm trying to describe. It's like a community space. They have restaurants. They do concerts there. We had Superman perform as part of it. I think coming in a couple of weeks, they have Snotty Nose Res Kids. Yeah, so it's just a really cool place. You can do podcasts there. So they have education. So when Lisa and Dr. Francis had met, I think they met at an ACE convention. Don't quote me on that one, but they had a conversation about she loved IPX and she wanted to bring that to Tacoma, to her community there. And so we kind of started with a smaller event first. So it was kind of like a smaller version of it in the sense there wasn't a whole lot of cosplay comic book to it. But we really we dove into Indigenous futurisms and what does that mean for all these different genres? What does that mean for Indigenous futurisms in fashion? So we invited Copper Canoe Woman and Kelly Holmes to come out and do a panel. And then that panel kind of grew. There was another local designer there. Mika is her company. And then Lisa herself had used to work in Native fashion industry as well. So we had this stacked panel. People like Vina Brown, that's Copper Canoe Woman. Her work is amazing to me personally as an artist. I've always wanted to meet her. One of the most kind artists I've ever met. And she's also very anti-gatekeeping. She's always been so inclusive with me because we both make jewelry in the same manner. We both have laser cut acrylic and abalone. And so going up in the Northwest and all of these canoe families and fishing, we got to open that whole festival. We had the Puyallup language department came out. They were teaching Lushootseed, which is the language for the Puyallup tribe. They're one of the federally recognized tribes. And it was a tribe I'd never worked with before. Right. So I'm in a place that is definitely not Southeastern, definitely not Plains. It's, Coast Salish, Pacific Northwest, totally different language system, totally different cultural values. So I was being just as culturally aware as I could because I didn't want to do anything, that's not, couth for their culture and know that I'm a guest there. And they just welcomed me immediately. And it was like being at home and it was aunties are the same everywhere. Right. Yeah. And then I realized all the parallels between the Northwest tribes and then the Southeast tribes, pre-contact, we would have been very similar, traveling the waterways, fishing, singing, doing. So I was like, oh, it's not really that different for me personally. For Plains tribes, it might be a little different that didn't use those waterways. But so that was really cool. So other things we thought about, we had Superman there, that contemporary way for powwow dance. And he does rap and he intertwines the two. So that's really beautiful. We had Connor Alexander. He's Cherokee, but he lives up there. And then Sade, they were both at IPX, but they created, Connor created the game. It's called Coyote and Crow, and it's a tabletop role-playing game. So if you think of D&D, right. But the map for it, if you've ever seen a map of maybe Cahokia mounds. So it's a mound builder culture game, and people have been going crazy for it across the country. You can buy that book. They sell the game at First Americans Museum in the store. You can buy it directly online at Native Realities. And then he also just came out with a brand new dice game, which is akin to like, he mixed different things, but he said like, if you ever played Yahtzee, he's like, you could catch on to this game really well. So it's cool to see contemporary games, what people are doing in that, augmented reality, how they do those things. We had a whole panel on decolonizing higher education. Often when you go to college, a lot of times you may be the only Native person in your entire class. And I know for me personally, I didn't have a female professor of color until I was in graduate school. Right. Like I didn't have any in undergrad. I had white male. Right. Yeah. Not anything against them or anything, but that's just the reality. Academia. Yeah. There's not a lot of Native people with PhDs to be able to go into those institutions and then like create those learning styles. And, it means a lot to be sitting in class and see someone that looks like you.
Of course.
And it was just so like shocking to me. It was Dr. Avila at the University of New Mexico. And I was just like, wow. And it was when I realized, I was like, I've never had a woman of color as a professor. So Dr. Robin Minthorn, she's from here in Oklahoma in the Lawton area, but she's been teaching at UW Tacoma. So I invited her over.
I loved seeing that. She's awesome.
She is. She's so sweet. And so, and she kind of started that journey too. Like I know she struggled at the beginning of her college. That's like a part of her story that she'll tell you about. And then now today, she stands with a PhD. And that's just like amazing. And so she's always working with departments to help all of the professors be better professors for their Indigenous students wherever she's teaching at in the country. I think that's amazing. And I know OU is going to be really happy they're bringing her back. She's moving back. She's announced it, so I could say it now. So it'll be really cool to see even here in Oklahoma, our universities get even better, like their faculty even better. I'm an OSU grad, but I'm in full support.
I love it. Go Pokes. I'm an OSU girl as well.
Yeah. So that was really cool to hear that lecture. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Indigenous entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? How is that different when you're an Indigenous business? Right. How do you get funding? We don't always have the access to the loans that other people do. We may not have that, like our parents may have not spent a lot of time working on building credit scores per se. Right. Like, how do you do that? And so JD Elquist, he came, and that's what he does professionally. And he came in and did a whole workshop on it. He did a panel, and I even learned stuff. I mean, as an artist, you're doing a business right. as well. So, like, how do you find those things, and how do you find the resources you need, and like, how do you do all of that? So that was really cool to see. So different types of futurisms. What are people doing today? We had an artist market. We had live painters. All of our live painters were Native. Our DJs for the whole event were Native. We had DJ Libby, we had DJ Ruckus. You can look both of those up on Instagram. So DJ Ruckus came from Oklahoma. So if you look up The Art of Tom Ferris, that's him. But he also DJs. So a lot of people don't know that. And so he was live painting there on skate decks.
Yes, I love it.
There's an Indigenous skate jam event coming later on at Alma. And so that organization came and tabled, and then they saw he was live painting and they liked his pop art. So they gave him a deck to paint. So that was cool. You can go on Native Realities. You can look on our social media pages and see all those. So that's what we did up in Tacoma. We have another event coming in the future that we're looking over on the east side in Philadelphia. It's not all the way solid. All the plans aren't there yet, but that's where we're looking to go and kind of do a more ACES STEM-based. Right. I think we're going to call that one Indigenous Worlds of Wonder. So IWOW.
Very cool. I love the acronym.
Yeah, and work with some community people that I met when I was in Santa Fe called We Are the Seeds with Tylene. So hopefully we'll get to work with them and, we'll get that going. But our next event is a really large event. It'll be in April, the 10th to the 12th, and it'll be IPX coming back. We already got confirmed. James Pepper Henry, the CEO director at FAM, and then Tom Ferris, the FAM store manager, they have already approved us to be back there. And so I've already been working with, different actors we had. We're trying to get new actors. We have a huge request. I'm going to work so hard to try to get as many Reservation Dog actors as I can. Unfortunately, they had just started filming for the 2023 one. And so we couldn't get a whole lot of them to come over for that. Like I've already talked with Kara Jade Myers. She was at our IPX we just had, and she wants to come back next year. And I know Killers of the Flower Moon, and when that launches in the US here, I know it's going to be huge. So if you look at ATCG Media, our blog page, we're compiling like all the launches, like where can you see this movie across the country for communities? So if you're listening to this and you are, planning or organizing one in your community, let us know. We're going to make a list so everybody knows where they can go see it first and be involved because it's really fun. I like going to premieres and
absolutely.
Yeah, watching it in a whole theater with Native people sounds really fun.
Well, you brought up Tom Ferris, and I have to say, just as a witness and being engaged with seeing everything that you and Tom worked so hard to do together at First Americans Museum with your team at the museum store. You mentioned earlier, not everyone has access to premier Native art. And through First Americans Museum store, you could really go in and access some of these books and artwork and just really cool, so much that you really wouldn't know existed. Even makeup, Native makeup and jewelry, and especially your jewelry, which I love as well. Can you? I know that you and Tom being artists, but the relationships you have again. I know that you all have done so much together and are doing more. And I know you're getting ready for Indian market too.
Yeah. So my position at FAM, I was hired on to be the assistant manager in the store and then do all the social media and run the website for the store. So that was really fun. And I also, again, kind of like how I said, I really love being able to support Roy with his new book. That's basically what I got to do every day at FAM. I got to champion for all of, inevitably they become your friends. I've, exhibited in, shows and markets with all of these people for years and years. And kind of like the goal and one of the heart missions of Jim even, which is the CEO of FAM, they really wanted artists to have a place here in Oklahoma that you didn't necessarily have to go to Santa Fe and do a Santa Fe Indian Market. It's a lot of money to do that. Last year was my first year as an Indian Market artist.
I have to say, you also won your category too.
Yeah. So in printmaking, I got first place. I did a really cool relief print of some of our mound builder iconography. And that's tribes in the Southeast where we had our mounds as part of our tribal culture there. And so some of those pieces we have, some of our ancestral pieces out of those mounds that we've been able to retain and rematriate and have those items we can see for ourselves. I've seen some of those objects now in person, and to create new work with those same designs that our ancestors made. It's just such...
I love that you said rematriate. I love that.
when we were getting those back, and museums and universities are finally giving us, sending our ancestors home, letting us put them to rest and just be with our family and have our ancestors back in their homelands where they're supposed to be. And so all of those things kind of went into the piece I was making for Indian Market.
So awesome.
Yeah. And so I get to share that. And that was really cool to me to see a Southeastern design win in a very heavily Southwestern style. Yeah. So very Navajo Pueblo. I'm not meaning anything negative towards it. It's just Santa Fe Indian Market it's held in New Mexico. So of course you're going to have the Southwest.
That's that heritage there.
Yeah. So I was really proud of, the jurors, and proud of the SWAI organization that, they selected a piece that was Southeastern. So that was really cool. And it's so fun to be in Santa Fe. And kind of when working in the job I do, I'm pretty much working all the time. Even if I'm doing my own art, I'm still representing my company wherever I work, whether it was FAM or Native Realities, because people know what you do on the side. I'm very extroverted. I'm very social. That's why the community engagement works so well for me.
I know.
Yeah. So I'll be going back to that. So this year, instead of doing Indian Market, I decided to only do Sovereign, which it'll be inside La Fonda Hotel. I've done it since they started. This is, I think, our third year for Sovereign now. So I'll have large pieces for that. I'm painting on stretched canvas, which I've never done before, and just so we can make bigger pieces. And then I'm sending that to Greg. He owns the Fahrenheit Gallery, which does the Sovereign show. He's going to stretch those for me just so I can make bigger pieces. And it's not so expensive to like ship like finished pieces. So that'll be like really fun. And he's holding a couple other shows, and 2 of them are coming from Oklahoma. So one is Collective Wisdom, which is curated by Billy Hensley. That'll be shown at the Sovereign Show. And then a new curator that we have coming, she's on her 2nd show now, Carly Treese, Muskogee woman out in the Tulsa area, and she's taking her new show up there. So both of those shows will also be in the same space as where I'm exhibiting as one of the featured artists. I'm just so thankful that Greg has allowed me, invited me back, for the 3rd year, and I'll get to have my jewelry. I kind of wanted to do that a little bit more than Indian market this year, just because the materials I use are not allowed. Acrylic, the way I do my earrings, are not allowed in Indian market, but they are. I can use them. I can sell them in Sovereign.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and it's air conditioned, so you guys can come inside and see me and not have to be sweaty outside.
I love wearing your jewelry. I love seeing your artwork. I have such pride, being an Oklahoma native woman. I have so much pride going out and seeing, to Indian market and walking around the booths and seeing such representation from Oklahoma native artists. And I really love when I see our Chata people being represented, by artists like you, and love what you're doing. And did you always know that you wanted to be an artist and do the work that you're doing now? I know that you were, driven to be an educator, and your daughter, she's an artist as well. Did you start at a very young age yourself?
Yeah. So I was really lucky in the sense of my grandfather, James Warren Hoover. He was a wood carver, but he was also a carpenter. So I got to watch him like build buildings, build barns, build things. And then also on the flip, he could also make beautiful sculptures, small pieces, big pieces. I can remember watching him like carve cardinals, carve different birds. And like, I remember watching him use a wood burner to put like the feather textures on things. And he passed away when I think I was about 8 or 9. But I always tell people my very first art market, I was a month old. My mom was a seamstress. So my mom, beautiful, she could sew like anything. So she often shared like a booth space with my grandparents. And so I went to I was born in September, and then I went to Tulsa Oktoberfest when I was a month old. And my mom would always like dress me up in all my the outfits that she would be selling. And so I love, I don't remember that a lot because I was a month old. So I just always grew up going to Mayfest, Oktoberfest, the state fair, Tulsa State Fair. My dad's sisters, they're all like painters. One of my actually 2 of them like still paint to this day. My dad was also an architectural draftsman. So my dad worked for Sun Oil at one part when I was a kid. And so we had, those giant blueprints when architecture was done by hand before AutoCAD in like the 80s. And so sometimes I would get those and I could draw on the back of them.
So cool. I would love to see those now, your little drawings.
We don't have those anymore. But I remember like always seeing my dad's models, but I could get it. I remember getting in his like drafting table drawers because he had the coolest pencils, all the leads. Awesome. So I did it. And so I never thought of it as a career though, like not because it was ever discouraged. So when I was finishing high school, I actually had a music scholarship for Oklahoma State. And I'll be honest, I met a boy my senior year of high school.
So many stories involve journeys like that.
And so we later got married, and then like that's where my daughter came from. But I ended up staying in the Tulsa area. And so where I started at college didn't have the program I was wanting to do music. So I was like, well, I was like drawing. I didn't really focus on art in high school at all. I was always focusing on my music education career. I wanted to be a band director. And so I was like, well, I like this. It was fun. I enjoyed drawing. And so I was like, well, I think it was a watercolor class with Harriet Derevier. I remember that. At Tulsa Community College. I started at community college, which was great because then I wouldn't have student loan debt from that. But so I did that, and I just fell in love. Right. And I was also coming into, by the end of high school, I was really like, I really wanted to know about my culture, and I didn't. After the Indian removal and like my mom, like, and her siblings, they were not taught Choctaw, even though my grandfather was a speaker, my Papa Jack. So, a lot of parents chose not to teach their children so that they wouldn't be hurt, or, all kinds of reasons. And so I wasn't raised with my language. So when I started college, I just kind of used my art in a way. It became my vehicle for learning, like, my culture. Yeah. So like cultural, like, revitalization. I always say it was my cultural reclamation. That's how I feel like I fully came into who I was. And then I realized too, once I started studying like all those mound builder designs, I realized everything I'd been sketching and doodling my whole life, like during, like, when teachers were talking, it was those same designs. Yeah. Like, it was such a, it really, like, was mind blowing to me. Even I was using designs I didn't even realize were, like, Choctaw or Southeastern.
Ancestors were speaking.
Yeah. And that just became, like, my focus. So my very first body work I ever made, it was all about that, like, me learning who I was as a Choctaw woman. I even, I was going through, like, gender issues. I always had gender identity issues my whole childhood. And then once I learned my culture, I kind of realized I really wasn't having gender so much issues. I was having cultural norms. I was having, I realized, once I learned, I was like, well, a Choctaw woman would have those masculine attributes. We had to be very hardy to survive genocide. So then I kind of realized if I'm in an indigenous setting with all Native people, I'm totally, like, 100%, I feel like, yeah, I'm a Choctaw woman. But if I'm in a non-Native setting, like, which happens because I'm an artist, sometimes in a totally non-Native gallery, just regular galleries, everybody in there is non-Native. That's when I start feeling those, like, I go back into that non-binary, like, realm. Because in that sense, in, like, mainstream, I still don't fit into those female gender norms, which is fine. So I just go non-binary in those places.
No, I relate to that. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah. So I kind of, and I also, in my, through all of that, I also came out, bisexual, and just a lot of things happened as I was learning my culture. It was really, obviously life-changing for me. And today, now my daughter's 7, she knows more Choctaw than I did until I was, like, in my late 20s.
She's a force. Talk about wow.
Yes. So Jewel's shooting star. She is, she's not one of those kids that people say has an old soul. I kind of figured it out one day when I was talking to another mom that was just saying, she went on, like, a field trip with Jewel, and I couldn't go, I was working, but her daughter was, like, basically covering her ears. It was really loud in the space they were in, and Jewel was telling her, it's okay, I'm the same too. Sometimes when it's really loud, it hurts my ears too. And that parent was just, like, so shocked, because she was only 6 at the time, that, a child could understand that. So I've always kind of realized that it's like Jewel has a really high emotional intelligence. Like, she can tell if something's wrong with me. She can tell, like, if I need a hug, or... And I don't know where that came from. Yeah, just that comes out of her. I don't know. Maybe it came from my mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that identity, our identity is so connected to that to our culture. And I think it's so interesting. And I know that Jewel learned so much from you. And we were talking about, our people, our Choctaw people. I love being at our Choctaw Cultural Center and even in our beautiful casino and resort and seeing your awesome work. I mean, large pieces, very vibrant pieces. And I mean, you create, like, beautiful work from, small earrings to big, beautiful ear to all different types of work, and your printmaking and your painting, and just seeing such diverse work from you. And I know that your commissions are just so great. I love seeing your fingerprints in special places that are special to me.
Yeah. So my first big commission piece was with the Starbucks. I remember when they first sent me the very first email. They're like, "We know this doesn't sound real." I'm in the registry, the Choctaw Registry, as an artist, and then here in Oklahoma with the Oklahoma Arts Council, and you look at like arts and public places, all those programs, and there's like 1% for the arts. So when new things are built, at least 1% has to go to the arts. And so when the Choctaw Nation was building and adding on to the tribal casino in Clara, Starbucks was looking for a floral painter, and Choctaw Nation required them to pick a Choctaw artist.
I love it.
So, I mean, that's what I am. I'm a floral painter. And I like to kind of go back a little bit more about the floral painter part. So a lot of that comes from like food sovereignty and gardening. So even though I didn't grow up in like a really traditional Choctaw way, I grew up gardening and with my parents, grandparents, siblings, nieces and nephews, and just learning how to work with the earth and like make food. Even though I didn't make it, the earth makes it, but we cultivate that. And then I realized when all these tribes started doing like their seed sovereignty programs, my daughter's dad is Cherokee, so we were able to get seeds from the Cherokee Seed Library, Choctaw Nation, and then I would trade with other people in other tribes. And I was so excited when my tribe came out with isito, that is a squash in Choctaw. So that was my first like ancestral seed I ever got. And I grew those. They're really delicious. It's like it has like the texture of sweet potato, but it's inside the squash. And they're like bigger than footballs. They're really big. They have a very long shelf life. So I grew that, and then I kind of realized while teaching my daughter how to do it and plant the seeds, and we water it and like garden and all that, I kind of realized that, my ancestors a long time ago in like Mississippi, in the eastern part of the U.S., our ancestors on purpose saved those seeds through Indian removal, through that Trail of Tears, through the walk. And there was all been different kinds of ways, different people like transported those seeds. Some of it sewed it into the hems of their clothing. Some of them braided it into their hair because they didn't know what kind of food was going to be there when they got to Oklahoma, or at the time, Indian Territory. And obviously today we know what kind of food and we know the growing regions, and we know all the different tribes that were nomadic and hunted buffalo. We know those tribes were put next to us and were not allowed to hunt. So we were in places where we didn't know how to grow things necessarily in the soil. Some of our gender norms were different for who did the gardening, for who grew. So we had all those kinds of issues. So we ended up on purpose in like starvation mode, and like because we couldn't like procure food in like any of the tribes in that area. And then so they gave us like the least they could do basically to keep us alive, So we kind of call like fry bread today like our survival food, because that was like all we had
out of our rations.
Yeah. And so all of that going in, and then realizing I have seeds that I can grow, and my daughter literally fed my daughter with food that my ancestors went through all of that to save for me is just. That's to me that I don't have words to how to describe that. And so all that went into my piece for the Choctaw Cultural Center. It was funny. They kind of came to me and they gave me this like little speech about the Choctaw squash, not knowing I'd ever grown it, like knew nothing about that. They just knew of me as a floral painter. They had seen my paintings I had done with like Indian blanket flowers. And they liked the flowers. So I was like, okay. So in the Cultural Center, my piece is kind of by the restaurant. And then they actually ended up putting my piece inside the Chief and Tribal Council's formal dining room.
So beautiful.
So that piece gets to be there while everybody's eating. And that piece is all about like squash. So it's our squash blossoms, kind of rotating and like going in motion from top to bottom, almost like they're falling down from the sky. So it was kind of funny when they got finished with their little speech telling me about it. And I remember like sending them photos. I showed them, I was like, I actually grow that squash. And And so they had all this like great like pictures of like Jewel and I in the garden, and then finished. And then I remember like standing next to the painting because it's 9.5 feet tall. It's really tall.
It's a placemaking piece. I have pictures with it, and when I see it, I know where that is.
Yeah, nobody realized how big it was until like it was hung and I stand up next to it, and I like it barely like the upper half of my body, and then the rest of the painting is so tall. It's giant. It was so big. I had to paint it sideways though in my garage. And I can remember, because it took a couple months to paint. I remember my daughter would come out and she would like, I had to take time away from her to do that. And I remember she'd be like, "Are you painting again?" Which I was, but now she's like so excited to like go see those things. And I know that one day when I'm no longer alive, my descendants can always go see that piece.
Thankfully.
And that makes me almost cry because, I've made something that's in a sense immortal as long as they preserve it and want it to be there. And like, that's crazy to think there'll be people that I'll never meet that get to go see that. And hopefully they get to hear the story, and hopefully they get to eat like the squash. Hopefully Jewel will garden, and then her kids, if she has them, and just that keeps going. So when they go see that painting, they'll know why that painting was so important to me and why it's so important to Choctaw people. It is our survival. It is our sovereignty. It is our ancestors. It's our living ancestors. And it's really cool that when the chief is having those meetings and dinners and as
relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's symbolic, I think, because of who you are and what you do. And that's about building relationships.
Yeah. And like the directions of where my tribe or our tribe is going, and that piece will be right there. I was like, that piece is going to hear so many crazy things. And
if that piece could talk, that's a public program we could do.
Yeah. So that's just crazy to me. I'm just so honored that I was asked to do that. And then when they had like the year anniversary for the Choctaw Cultural Sunday, they invited me back. I got to do live paintings. Hopefully I'll get to go back every year.
Always great to see that, to see you paint. And, speaking about, planting those seeds, these little ones around us and, all people, they're getting into, like, we talk about DJ and artwork and acting and reading books and following comics and collecting art because of awareness. And I really think that symbolism of planting the seeds, you literally do, but you plant the seeds and creating that awareness that really connects people and inspires them and builds confidence in them to create and to do more. And, this podcast, Timber People, people like timber do create, they build and they connect, like that fuel that feeds fire that brings us together. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to dedicate this episode to our beloved friend, and I know your dear mentor, Benjamin Harjo Jr., who, seminal absentee Shawnee, world-renowned artist, the Picasso of American Indian art. And I know we will be honoring his life, him and his just beautiful life and later. And I just really want to dedicate this episode to him.
Yeah, I did mean to get to a point to actually talk about, like, when you asked if I knew that was going to be my career to be an artist. When I did my BFA show, my first body of work, Ben was actually there when like I got to it's not really defending a thesis as much for your BFA, but he came to that for me. They still call it that, and I have pictures of Ben at that, and like he was just like you said, has been my mentor for decades now. And I used to go see him at Indian Market and him at Cherokee Art Market. Like, I would go to his shows and he would always be like, "Why aren't you here? Your art needs to be here. You need to do this." Right. And I just, at the time, I didn't have the confidence in my art to do that. I didn't think I was a good enough artist, but Ben kept thinking, Ben thought I was. So finally, my first market I did was actually Cherokee Art Market. And I did it in a group booth with the Southeastern Indian Artists Association. And I remember when I told Ben, he was just like so excited that I finally did it. And then for years, he kept trying to get me to do Indian Market. And I was like, no, I won't get in. I won't get in. And then my first year. And so last year at Indian Market was the first time, because I had a thing about, I always called it Ben Hugs every year, because I lived in Albuquerque then. And so all my friends would come from Oklahoma to Indian Market. So I go see them, like Bobby and Tony and the late Shan and Ben, of course. And I would just hang out in Ben's booth for hours and hours and sit and like chat with Sally Ann. And then finally, this past year, Ben got to come to my booth for the very first time. Because Ben was also a printmaker. A lot of times he's just seen as a painter. Mm-hmm. So we work in the same realm. I always have a little funny story about Ben. When I was working at FAM, I sold his work in the store. And one time, he's probably dropping off stuff to sell. And I was asking him, like, why haven't we collaborated? Why have we never made art together? And he thought about it. And I can, like, hear his voice right now in my head and Ben's laugh, like little chuckles. Yeah. And he said, okay, we can collaborate. He was like very like serious about it. And it was kind of, now looking back, I should have known he was joking, but he was serious. And he looks at me and he goes, okay, you can paint all my backgrounds from now on. Oh, wow. And then I look at him, and as I've been selling his work, and I've known his work for decades, and I was like, you don't have a background. He's like, exactly. He's like, you shouldn't mess those up there. You know, I'm like, it's white paper, Ben. So I told him though, I was like, okay, then I'm going to sign my name on everything you make after that. So that was his little way to, I don't know, he made me laugh, and I'll always remember that. And I mean, he recently passed away just a couple weeks ago. So, and his last exhibition is up, and that's where his memorial service will be at tonight, Oklahoma Contemporary. I got to watch that whole show be hung, and I remember like texting him. I got invited to be a different part of that show, not to work with Ben. I got hired to paint for another elder. She's a potter, and they wanted to translate her pottery into a 2D wall mural. She's a little bit older and probably wouldn't want to be up on the lifts and climbing on ladders and things. So they gave her a list of artists, and they let her select. And when the curator came to me, Pablo, he's like, you're my first choice, but, it'll be up to Jerry. And I remember, like, he read her my name, and that was who she picked. So I got to paint a mural for Jerry. So I remember, like, I told Ben that and talking to him about it. And he's like, well, that's good. He's like, and I told him, I was like, I get to paint her foreground. Yeah. So that was really good. And then the last time I actually got to talk to Ben, he had been at the Artesian Market in Sulphur for Chickasaw Nation. I knew he had fallen in the shower. And so I was calling to check on him because I didn't know if like he'd gotten stitches. I didn't know any of those things. And so like I called, he didn't answer. But then he called me back, and he was saying he broke the tile, but he didn't like bust open his head. And so Ben's head was so hard. And then, so that was the last like phone conversation I had with it. After that, it was like a few texts. And then obviously his health really declined after I think he was gone just a couple weeks after that. And I'm just so thankful. Like I got to have that conversation with him, and so thankful for all the so many different things he encouraged me to do and discouraged. Like he was honest about like shows not to do. I even didn't listen to him one time, and I tried to do a show. He told me not to do it anyways. And it ended up a disaster. I ended up not doing it. And of course, he being Ben, he definitely said, I told you so. So I should have listened.
We have so many great memories of Ben, and you talk about Indian Market, just being out there with Ben and Barbara, and his smile, his laughter, his artwork lit up the world, and have inspired so many people, and just so appreciative of his friendship. And I appreciate your friendship, my Choctaw sister, Kristin Gentry. Do you want to share your website for the listeners?
Sure. It's creativenative.com, and creative is with a K. because my first name is Kristin, and it's the same for Instagram. It's Creative Native. I try to do that for everything. So if you ever purchase from me in person, if you ask me my Venmo, it's Creative Native. I made that years ago just to kind of be like funny. Like I thought it was a cute, like little rhyming name. And then it kind of just became my brand. And so I just use that now and go on there and purchase Philbrook, Gilcrease, BAM, DNA Galleries. I'm going to be added at Caddo Nation. They have a new gift shop they just purchased. So I'll be selling there. And then I'm represented at one gallery in Santa Fe now, which is really amazing. It's really exciting for me. It's called Form and Concept, the Zane Bennett group. And I'm planning to do a one-day show exhibition and have an opening during Indian Market. I think we're looking at Friday night of Indian Market. So people can come see my paintings there too. So I kind of have two things going on. And I sell at that gallery year round, and I sell my jewelry there in Santa Fe. And I'm just blown away at all the opportunities that that I've been brought into, and it's humbling, and then it's I don't know. I'm trying to think of the words. It's very emotional for me. You get the imposter syndrome, like I shouldn't have these opportunities, or like that I don't deserve these things, and that's really hard. And I know a lot of artists deal with that. That's very common. But I keep getting them.
I think that's not. I know that's real, and I appreciate you saying that, and I understand, like so many people do. I think some of that as Native people is connected to historic trauma too. But I'm so grateful for what all you are doing, and Native Realities. People can learn about Native Realities from what is their website?
Yeah, so it's thenativerealities.com, or you can go to ATCG Media, and that I'll have an interview up real soon. I'm interviewing Sterling Harjo now that he's done filming for season 3. And then, so the ATCG is where you can go buy like our books and comic books and games and all kinds of stuff on there. The Native Realities is more like the outreach and the community events. So you can go to either of those, and our socials are the same. We do have an digipopx.com website if you just want to look at the convention, if you want to see like what we're going to be doing for the convention next year, who's coming, what celebs you want to meet, what panels you want to go to. And feel free, please email me, Kristin.Gentry@nativerealities.com, if there's someone you want to see, and I will try my best to get them and work with their managers. And you can either professionally, or my personal is KristinGentry@hotmail.com. Everything's pretty easy.
Thank you. And I also want to say, I would love to have you back on the show to other updates. I know you're doing so much. And so thank you so much for being on the show. Yakoki.
Yakoki. Thank you.
Yakoki. Thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.